Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
American influence all over Manchester.
Hmm? This reminded me of the... Hey, guys. How are you? Sorry. This reminded me of the video where it's like, did you know a little piece of land in in the UK is American? And it was talking about a little land that was dedicated to... Was it JFK? I'm bringing up an example that I'm not even sure about. Never mind. Forget it. Why a statue of Abraham Lincoln is in Manchester? I don't know. Let's check it out.
A lot of it we could do without.
But you might wonder, why a statue of Abraham Lincoln in Manchester?
I have no idea.
Lincoln was president of the United States during the American Civil War. It became the war to end slavery. It's one of the best documented wars in history. But the part that Manchester played in this history...
Hold on. I got to give my initial... It looks like Thomas the Tank Engine. I have to give my initial guess, okay? Which could be completely wrong, but I feel like I would like at least something a little from me. Maybe... Well, now my guess is altered because it's specific to Manchester. Crap. Maybe because a big reason that European powers didn't meddle in the U.S. Civil War was because Abraham Lincoln made it a war specifically about emancipating slaves. And so they didn't want to be involved with that because they were a bit more progressive compared to America, especially the American South. And maybe just as like to show unity in that pursuit of getting rid of slavery, that England would adopt a statue of Abraham Lincoln. That's my best guess. Let's find out.
...was in history.
Right.
But the part that Manchester played in this history is largely forgotten.
Old England is mighty, old England is free. She boasts that she ruleth the waves of the sea. But between you and I, that's all fiddle-dee-dee. She cannot, O Cotton, she cannot rule thee. Lo, Manchester, lording the greatness shall own, and yield more to thee than he would to the throne. For before thee shall bend this fat marrow bone, and deaf be his ear to the live chattels groan. Wow, he was tall.
They called it Cottonopolis. It's still said with pride today. In the 19th century, Manchester was the workshop of the world. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone in the world who wasn't wearing cloth from the mills of Manchester.
How does it work? Is this the cotton gin, or is this something else? So, you guys can fast forward if you want to just get back to me watching the video. That's up to you. So, I want to know how it goes from plant. I was about to say from sheep. That's wool. From plant to roll. Not from plant to clothing, but just from plant to the roll, and then the roll to the clothing. So I would assume it's similar to sheep's wool, which I don't know much about either, but that you collect it from the plant, and then you put it in some water or like a combing process where you just comb it and comb it and comb it and comb it until you get more straight strands, like you would someone's hair that's more curly. You just comb it, comb it, comb it. But then the strands can't be that long, and so how do you attach the strands to each other to make one long length of strand? And then this machine must interwove them like you would a quilt or something into a piece of fabric that you can use as clothing. But how do you make one long strand?
Wasn't wearing cloth from the mills of Manchester.
There was so much cotton moving through the streets of Manchester that they had to install these iron curbs. The heavily laden cotton carts were constantly cracking the stone ones.
On the 12th of April, 1861, the American Civil War started.
Sumter.
Almost immediately, Lincoln announced the Union blockade of all southern ports. The Union thought it would cripple the southern economy, and the Confederates thought it would backfire and bring Britain into the war against the Union.
Yeah, I have heard that. I wanted to say something else. Damn.
Cripple the southern economy.
Oh yeah, I've heard that the American Civil War is considered the first modern war. Is that just an American consideration, or do Europeans think that too? I'm pausing too much already. Sorry.
And the Confederates thought it would backfire and bring Britain into the war against the Union.
I'm not sorry. Look here, boys. I don't care 2 pence for your noise, but if you throw stones at my windows, I must thrash you both.
The effect was devastating to Britain, specifically Lancashire and Manchester. Almost 80% of the cotton used in Britain came from the southern states. Without it, the mills of Lancashire fell silent. Less than a year into the Civil War, the effects of the cotton embargo were taking their toll. When the war began, there were 2,500 cotton factories in Lancashire.
Hey, by the way, Lancashire is the place where my mother's father's part of the family came from to America. So that's interesting.
They employed about 500,000 people, and more than double that depended on the cotton trade. The cotton supply dried up. Soon there were less than 500 mills. Most workers were laid off, and the few that remained were at best part-time. It sent shockwaves throughout the entire nation. Dock workers, merchants, even coal miners were out of work. No factory, no need for coal. It became known as the cotton famine.
Wait a second. Okay, I'm stretching here. I'm thinking maybe that's the reason why they fled there. This isn't okay. I'm going to
It became known as the cotton famine. The devastation it caused is unimaginable in 21st century Britain. By the second year of the war, families were destitute and starving.
The dark satanic mills of Manchester were well known to Frederick Engels. After all, his family owned one. His book, The Condition of the Working Class in England, is the best account we have of the people who worked in these mills. Life here was horrible. Cotton was king, and its servants worked in the mill. But now, they didn't even have that.
They lived hand to mouth, but they were amongst the best paid of the working class in England. In the southern states of America, though, there was another class of humans. If cotton was king in Manchester, in the southern states of America, it was a brutal tyrant.
The worker bees of Manchester were well aware that the last hands that touched the cotton were the slaves of the southern states. They had a deep hatred for slavery.
In 1788, the first petition demanding an end to the slave trade was presented to Parliament by the people of Manchester. Manchester had a population of about 75,000 in 1792. Over 20,000 signed the petition to end the slave trade. Well before the Civil War, there were committees raising money to support the Underground Railroad, helping slaves escape the southern states.
Manchester and the north of England were at the forefront of social change. Chartism was a significant working-class movement for political reform. The battle for the right to vote started just across the River Irwell here in 1838.
In 1833, after many heated debates, Britain itself abolished slavery. The fight for freedom was nothing new here. The working class of Manchester clearly saw the link between their lives and the life of a slave. Opinions were divided. Some wanted Britain to intervene to end the blockade and resume the flow of cotton. More Confederate flags were flying alongside the Mersey than there were in the southern states. Most of the mills in Lancashire supported the southern states, or at least saw support as the best way out of this crisis.
I was going to say earlier that if you remove your moral objections, then the South being the cause of the supply, a lot of the good cotton coming to your area that kept factories open, despite how squalid the conditions were, then I'm sure there were a lot of people who would have been for that side.
But not all. Some wanted an outright end to slavery, no matter the cost. It came to a head on New Year's Day, 1863, with the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln declared that all the slaves were free. This galvanized opinion in Manchester.
I've been to a few crazy New Year's Eve parties, but I can't...
It's such a crazy moment because not just for, the emancipation of Black Americans, but just as a moment in the time where for the war up to then and for a decade or more before the war, decades before the war, there had been this thing of like, oh, you're trying to get rid of slavery, and so like we're gonna have state by state introduction of like new states. If a new state came in and it was a slave state, then the free states would be like, we need a free state. And if another new state came in and it was a free state, the slave state would be like a slave state. And it was such a balancing act to keep together the union of slave state, free state. Like, okay, the North doesn't like slavery as much. The South enjoys and wants slavery. And then at this moment, the Emancipation Proclamation is like, you know what? It's like a decades-long release. It's like, it is about slavery now. No more slaves anywhere. And I'm sure a lot of Southerners were like, see? I don't know. Just such a crazy, crazy moment. I'm sure that it was in the history. Seeing that in the history of America, seeing that decades before it, it was such a huge problem. And then the president just comes forth and says, yeah, it is about slavery at this point. Crazy.
I've been to a few crazy New Year's Eve parties, but I can't imagine what happened here on New Year's Eve 1862. In anticipation of Lincoln's proclamation, over 6,000 people packed inside here. The purpose of the meeting wasn't your regular affair with a countdown at midnight. An advertisement appeared in the Manchester Guardian. Workers condemn British capitalists and journalists for their support of the southern states. The meeting contributed to Prime Minister Lord Palmerston staying out of a war with the Union. By the end of the meeting, the working people of Manchester have produced a letter of solidarity to Lincoln. The letter concludes,
The erasure of that foul blot on civilization and Christianity, chattel slavery, during your presidency will cause the name of Abraham Lincoln to be honored and revered by posterity.
Yeah, you can go ahead if you want. You can fast forward. The Lancashire Cotton Famine, 1861-1865, Free Trade Hall Public Meeting, 30th December 1862, Chairman Abel Haywood. Extract of an address from the working people of Manchester to His Excellency Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States of America. The vast progress which you have made in this short space of 20 months fills us with hope that every stain on your freedom will shortly be removed, and that erasure of that foul blot on civilization and Christianity, chattel slavery, during your presidency will cause the name of Abraham Lincoln to be
honored and revered by posterity.
We are certain that such a glorious consultation will cement Great Britain and the United States in close and enduring regards. This statue is the work of sculptor George Gray Barnard, and was presented to the city of Manchester by Mr. and Mrs. Phelps Taft of Cincinnati, Ohio. It commemorates the support that the working peoples of Manchester gave in the fight for the abolition of slavery during the American Civil War. By supporting the Union under President Lincoln at a time when there was an economic blockade with the southern states, the Lancashire cotton workers were denied access to raw cotton, which caused considerable unemployment throughout the cotton industry.
Despite the unbearable hardship caused by the Union blockade, the working class of Manchester chose to throw their support behind Lincoln and an end to slavery. Lincoln was well aware of the weight of this letter. Within a few weeks,
the fact that there are a lot of people, of workers at the time, who depended on the cotton, but they also saw the squalor of their conditions with the likely much worse squalor of the slaves' conditions supplying the cotton, and that empathy with the conditions of the work won out over the short-term benefit of that cotton from the slaves is such a magical thing.
He replied. The statue bears an extract from his letter.
I know and deeply deplore the sufferings which the working people of Manchester and all in Europe are called to endure in this crisis. It has been often and studiously represented that the attempt to overthrow this government, which was built on the foundation of human rights, and to substitute for it one which should rest exclusively on the basis of slavery, was likely to obtain the favor of Europe. Through the action of disloyal citizens, the working people of Europe have been subjected to a severe trial for the purposes of forcing their sanction to that attempt. Under these circumstances, I cannot but regard your decisive utterances upon the question as an instance of sublime Christian heroism, which has not been surpassed in any age or in any country. It is indeed an energetic and re-inspiring assurance of the inherent truth and of the ultimate and universal triumph of justice, humanity, and freedom. I hail this interchange of sentiments, therefore, as an augury that whatever else may happen, whatever misfortune may befall your country or my own, the peace and friendship which now exists between the two nations will be, as it shall be my desire to make them, perpetual.
But the workers still faced poverty, starvation, lack of heating, and eviction. John Bright of Rochdale reached Lincoln through Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts, asking if a few cargoes of flour could come as a gift from persons in your northern states to the Lancashire working men. I am one of the thousands that were filled with flour and sent by the free states of America in the ship George Griswold to the starving people of Lancashire, whose miseries were caused by the aggressive and civil war of the slave owners in 1862. This barrel was sent as part of an aid package to the mill workers of Northwest England by Abraham Lincoln and the people of New York and Philadelphia on the 9th of February, 1863. The relief ship George Griswold docked at Liverpool, carrying boxes of bacon and bread, bags of rice and corn, and 15,000 barrels of flour, destined for the starving people of Lancashire in recognition of their support of the northern states during the American Civil War. It was greeted on the dockside by an enthusiastic crowd of nearly 4,000 people. When Lincoln was assassinated on the 15th of April, 1865, in his pocket was a letter of support from John Bright. George Gray Bernard's bronze statue of Abraham Lincoln was initially intended to stand outside the Houses of Parliament. It was to commemorate 100 years of peace since we set fire to the White House in 1814. The sculptor took a warts-and-all approach to the statue. It was judged to be too unstatesmanlike for Southern tastes and dubbed the stomachache statue. A lifeless, dour, more statesmanlike sculpture was commissioned for London. Bernard's statue remained homeless throughout the First World War until Manchester stepped in. It was unveiled in Platt Fields in 1919 and later moved here to Lincoln Square in the town centre in 1986.
There is an afterlife, and we will be judged. It may not be by some omniscient being, but we will be judged by history. Let's hope Manchester still has the spirit of the brave people of the cotton famine, and are judged as favorably.
Holy crap. For once, I was about to... I'm not a very religious person. So I was like, where are you going here? If you're religious, that's great. I have no issue with it, okay? But what he said right there was very moving. That regardless if you believe in an afterlife, you're going to be judged by people in the future, which is undeniably true. And as much as I don't want to make this about, but I can't feel a kind of connection to the fact that I can even give you the streets: Churchill Road, Littleborough, Lancashire, England, as a place that I know I have. Part of my ancestry came from that exact area. And the fact that I'm from Rhode Island and from New England, I'm on the kind of Rhode Island, Massachusetts border, and the fact that there was a trade of good faith at the time between Massachusetts and Manchester, it fills me with a lot of something, happiness. Just, I like it, feels good. And maybe somehow this could have contributed to people coming over here and me being here. So as much as I just want to talk about this in its whole and just the sake of history, I do feel a kind of personal connection there too. That was very interesting, fascinating. It's a great video. Did I subscribe to him? No, I didn't, but I definitely will. That was great. That was a fantastic video. Loved it. I love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. Whatever. You guys are always great with that. And hopefully I'll see you guys next video. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.